the position to be ready to tank. Last night when we left, the weather front coming in was supposed to hit around 7 p.m. It didn't hit till much later, which really threw us a loop for retracting the RSS. I'll let Mike go into the details, but his team did an amazing job of getting that done. I think we rotated the RSS about 5 hours late, but we had an on-time tanking this morning. So the team did an amazing job of working ahead on what they could and having a plan ready to execute as soon as the weather cleared up, and they did just that. A really great example of what the team here at Kennedy can do. Once we got on console, heard the weather briefing, looked like a really good day to tank, so we got started with that. Had a few little things just to keep us talking. There was a leaky hydrogen fill line on the MLP in the right ohms. One of the regs was running a little higher than it should, so we hooked it up to a different tank to put some ullage in there and bleed down that pressure. And then we had the APU heater problem. Basically, in the APU system, APU stands for Auxiliary Power Unit. It's the system we use to generate hydraulic power. So it burns off hydrazine, spins a turbine which drives a pump which pumps hydraulic fluid around the orbiter. We use that hydraulic fluid to throttle and gimbal the main engines, move the aero surfaces, everything you'd use hydraulic power for in an airplane, a large airplane. So we had a problem in one of the heaters on the fuel line, and the fuel is hydrazine. And when you get in orbit, if you can't keep the heater on, that hydrazine can freeze up. And when it freezes, that line can get compacted and loaded up with a lot of hydrazine. And when it thaws, you're worried about a big pressure spike coming into the line as that hydrazine thaws and potentially rupturing the line and causing a leak. Leaking hydrazine is really bad because when you get back in the atmosphere, it immediately catches on fire and would have a big problem. So we don't want a fuel leak in the aft compartment of the orbiter. This particular system, there's 2 heaters on this APU-1. Both of them are required for operations so that we do have the redundancy, because if you did lose your last heater while you're in orbit, you wouldn't necessarily have time to react. The loss of that system on orbit, what we would do is, had this problem occurred once we got on orbit, we would have noticed it, the crew would have evaluated, and the ground controls team would have evaluated the thermal response. We might have been able to periodically run the APU to keep it warm. Kind of doubtful in the attitude that we get stuck with in station, because both of station's restrictions and shuttle's restrictions, we can't really maneuver wherever we want to from an attitude and put the sun on the right spot. So we probably would have burned that system off, basically burned it to depletion, got rid of all the hydrazine, and therefore not worried about it. Loss of a single APU by itself on orbit is not an early mission termination. That would have been an okay posture to be in for the mission had we lost an APU. So had we not caught this pre-launch, it would have been an okay day on orbit. It wouldn't have been a bad day, but it's a really good thing we did catch it, because that gives us the opportunity to now fix it and launch with full up redundancy. Mike can talk to you about a little more about what signature we actually saw and what we're going to now have to do to troubleshoot. But it was a pretty straightforward scrub today. The team made a very good call. We talked about it for about the right amount of time, and then we talked a little bit more just to make sure we really did have all the right understanding of the system, and more importantly, to make sure while we were sitting there, you almost get a kind of a free orbit checkout, because you have that really cold hydrogen and oxygen in the aft compartment chilling everything down. So we really got to see how this heater performed and all its associated heaters. We wanted to make sure before we started the drain that there weren't any other troubleshooting steps to take, and we did that. Didn't have anything to do, and so Mike made that scrub call, and it was a really good one at the right time. So now we're in a recovery plan. I'll let Mike talk to you about that plan and what that means to us in terms of the range and the schedules. We look like we got a good shot to keep trying here. There's an Atlas that's scheduled for launch right now on the 6th. So our last possible launch attempt would be on Wednesday the 4th in front of that Atlas launch. They look like they're still in good shape. We'll obviously keep tabs on them as we go forward. But if we had to go on the other side of them, we'd come back probably around the 8th or 9th. Those aren't really good launch days from the station's perspective. That would couple the shuttle's undocking with the 25 Soyuz undocking, and we don't want those two events on top of each other. This is a case where we can actually allow the 25 Soyuz to undock while the shuttle's present. We just can't do that on the same day. So we'd have to wait a couple extra days. We'd probably move to the 9th, maybe even the 10th, as our first launch attempt on the other side of Atlas. We're going to have to go do some homework there and talk to the Russians about exactly the right way to deconflict that. But we're not going to do too much on that just yet, because we think we still got a shot in front of Atlas. And with that, I'll stop talking so Mike can give you more of the details.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Well, let's see. The Mike mentioned how well we did overnight. The launch team did overnight, getting recovered from the rotating service structure delay, and that was an outstanding effort. To say it was 4 or 5 hours late probably doesn't sound like much to the folks in the room, but I can tell you that it was an outstanding effort. Probably the latest we've ever rotated the RSS and still got to tanking on time. So tanking was going perfectly fine, and we started talking about the APU issue at about 9 o'clock this morning, give or take a few minutes. And what we saw was that when the fuel line chilled down because of the environment in the aft of the orbiter, the thermostat that controls the heater didn't come on, didn't command the heater to come on. It's much like a thermostat in your home. When it gets cold and you want the heat, the thermostat kicks on the heater. That didn't happen. And there wasn't much troubleshooting we could do while we were still in ET load. We had to get back into the crew module and command the heater on from the crew module itself. So we had to wait until we were done with ET load to get the ground crews into the ship and do that next part of the troubleshooting, which was to command the heater on from the crew module, and that didn't work. And so at that point we knew we had a problem with that heater. We weren't sure if it was a thermostat or the heater, but we knew we only had one of those two. And we did some talking, as Mike said. We talked for a couple of hours about could we get comfortable launching in a configuration like this. And frankly, this was a pretty straightforward scrub declaration today. You don't like lifting off without redundancy, especially in a critical system like that. So we declared the scrub at 12:16 today. The team immediately got into the drain operation of the external tank. Both commodities are off the tank now. It takes us 24 hours to fully drain the tank. There's a little bit of hydrogen left in the bottom of the tank that has to boil off, and then we inert the tank with helium. That operation takes a full 24 hours from the scrub declaration, and so tomorrow afternoon will be the first time we can start going into after the orbiter, which is where this fuel line is for the auxiliary power unit. We have to go into after the orbiter. We have to get our hands on the fuel line. We have to get our hands on the thermostat and the heater to really see what the problem is. So aft access is absolutely required. That'll happen tomorrow afternoon, and maybe about dinner time tomorrow we'll start our troubleshooting. The troubleshooting involves taking in a can of mist and spraying it on the thermostat to see if we can force a lower temperature on the thermostat and have it kick on, lower than the temperatures we could have gotten in the ship today by ambient. And if that works, then we might have just a thermostat that's out of kilter, and we could replace that thermostat and be in good shape. If it's more than that, then it could be in a box called the LCA, the Load Control Assembly, which is essentially a box full of switches, basically. And if there's something wrong in that box and we have to change out that box, that's a much more extensive job. It would take us quite some time to do that. But we're not there yet. Right now, we think we can get in. We will get in and do the check on the heater itself, on the thermostat and the heater. And if we can go down the easy path, we're still on a track for Monday morning. This initial round of troubleshooting still supports a launch attempt Monday morning. So that's the path we're on now. I have a launch team meeting tomorrow evening to see how the troubleshooting is going, and then another meeting Sunday morning to see what transpired overnight Saturday night with further troubleshooting. So that's where we are today. Unfortunate for Team Endeavour and Mark Kelly and his crew. I talked to Mark when he was in the Astrovan. It was kind of funny the way the timing worked out today. The crew was ready to go out to the pad, and we weren't ready yet to scrub, and so we let them proceed to the pad. But then we held them at the launch control centers. There was no reason to commit them inside the launch danger area. And so I talked to them in the Astrovan and told them what was going on, and they understood. And then shortly after that, we scrubbed, and they turned around and came back to their crew quarters in the operations and checkout building. So a disappointing day for Team Endeavour and the astronauts, but as we always say in this business, we will not fly this machine until it's ready, and today it was not ready to go. We hope we can get there by Monday, and we'll have more status for you as the weekend goes on. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mike. And we'll take questions now. Please be sure to give your name and affiliation.